She came to discuss important policies, but when Sunny Hostin questioned her tone, Jasmine Crockett's response was so cutting and honest that it brought the show to a halt. That moment started a discourse all around the country. Things were strangely quiet backstage. No loud arguments or dramatic energy as before. There were only the faint noises of hairdryers, heels clicking on the floor, and a phone buzzing. Jasmine sat quietly in a cream-colored chair with her blazer behind her. She took a sip of water and looked at her notes, even though she didn't need them. Charmaine, her assistant, kept looking at the clock, waiting for the producers to say anything. Then a producer yelled, 15 minutes, and Jasmine agreed, putting away her notes. She didn't need to be reminded of the flawed jail system. She had seen it up close in her district, via lengthy case files and sleepless evenings, reading the names of people who were stuck in a system that never gave them a chance. She was all set, but she had other things on her mind. Is everything okay? Charmaine questioned. Jasmine took a deep breath and adjusted her hearing. You know how this show is? Either they love you or they try to make you a headline. Charmaine didn't say anything. They had both seen tapes on the show before when some visitors got hard questions that were really just kindness. People typically called black women who were smart and talked with confidence difficult. A knock on the door said, "We're taking you to the stage now." Jasmine rose up and put her folded notes in her jacket pocket. She wasn't going to read them. She just wanted to remember why she was there. She spoke her truth, not to get through sound bites. The trek to the stage seemed longer than it was. The floor was inundated with bright lights. Jasmine looked over the table. Sunny was on the left, Whoopi was in the middle, and Alyssa Farrah Griffin was on the right. Jasmine instantly saw that Joy wasn't there today. She sat down across from Sunny. Whoopi grinned and said, "Are you ready?" Jasmine smiled back. The indicator for applause lit up. The cameras got set up and the mics started working. And just like that, it's time to act. Whoopi welcomed Jasmine to the show and thanked her for coming to talk about her job in Congress and how to make the criminal justice system better. Jasmine smiled and waited for her turn. At first, everything seemed fine. Then Sunny leaned in, courteous but firm. Congresswoman Crockett, you've built a name for yourself not only for what you fight for, but also for how you fight. Some people believe your tone is aggressive. Are you worried that would turn folks who agree with you away? Jasmine turned her head. She had heard this question before, but not so early in the morning or on live TV. She took a deep breath and stated, people often think that when women, especially black women, speak with confidence, they are being aggressive. But I don't have to be liked at work. I have to fight for what is right. The audience clapped and said, and I can't do that by whispering. Sunny didn't back down. But don't you think there's a line between supporting and opposing? The tone was set. Jasmine, on the other hand, maintained quiet. She has been in cooler rooms before. Jasmine wouldn't back down if Sunny tried to push her. The room wasn't mean. People in the audience clapped now and then. Most of the time, the host smiled. Jasmine handled the initial questions with poise, putting more emphasis on rehabilitation than punishment. She told the truth about things like how nonviolent criminals can spend decades in prison, how youngsters can be sentenced like adults, and how some of the institutions she had been to didn't even have working air conditioning. Whoopi leant in and said, so it's not just about policy. Who gets a second chance and who doesn't? Exactly, Jasmine said. Some people get a second chance after making a mistake. Some people get erased, and the crowd clapped even more. Sunny moved her pen around and leant forward as if she were taking notes, but then she cut in sharply. Congresswoman, some people feel that when you respond emotionally instead of maintaining calm, like with Marjorie Taylor Greene, you lose credibility. Isn't staying calm part of the job? Jasmine maintained calm, and her voice got a little cooler. Sunny kept going. If someone disrespects you in public while you're working, do you have to just smile and say nothing to protect their image? Sunny opened her mouth but stopped. Jasmine didn't wait. You're telling me to choose between being calm and being honest and standing up for myself? With all due respect, I don't think women, especially black women, owe anyone that. People in the room stopped talking. There was no clapping, just the crushing weight of her words. Whoopi tried to get the conversation back on track by talking about policy, but Sunny wasn't done. It's not simply about saying things. It's all about how well it works. If your presence makes the news, does that help or hurt the cause? Jasmine leaned back, deep in thought yet resolute. Are we really going to act like my tone is the problem? People say guys are impassioned when they raise their voices. I'm aggressive when I do it. Do you really think I don't see this double standard? I've been there. She made a small gesture. I do well because I tell the truth. People pay attention, learn, and feel like they are being observed. People wrote to me after that hearing, not because I yelled, but because I stood my ground. The audience clapped, and some others said they agreed. Sunny's eyes got smaller. The fight was about to happen. Let me play devil's advocate, she added. Some people say you make these moments about yourself, and the camera loves you because you want it to. Charmaine looked nervous backstage. These queries were no longer about policy. They were about Jasmine's style and personality. Jasmine smiled, and it was a true smile. I'm a member of Congress. I am a black lady from South Dallas with natural hair, and I don't want to change who I am to fit a mold that was never made for me. I would have taken the easy way if I wanted it, but I didn't. The camera finds me, but not because I'm performing. It's because I'm telling the truth in a room that doesn't want to hear it. The room was full of applause. Sunny glanced at her calmly and knew that Jasmine wasn't giving them the soundbite they needed. Sunny was foolish to think the moment was finished. Things were just getting started. Sunny turned her notepad over. Since you brought up identity and image, do you think being confrontational helps policy move forward? Some voters are concerned that your tone takes away from the content. The term presentation hung in the air. This was no longer about politics. Jasmine's eyes got a little smaller. We mix up being assertive with being confrontational, especially when women like me talk. Sunny asked, are you worried about becoming a symbol instead of a lawmaker? You are well known, but is it good for your brand or your constituents? Jasmine's eyebrows went up in amazement. Are you asking me if I care more about my brand or my people? I ran for government to help people, not to sell things. And it's strange that guys don't get asked that same question when they become viral. Some people clapped while others weren't sure what to do. Sunny grinned tightly. How people see things is important. Jasmine leant in, calm but clear. People have always used how they see things against women like me. I don't see how being neutral helps me. People put labels on me. That's how things are for me every day. I wouldn't get anything done if I worried what people who don't bother to understand me think. The clapping got louder. Alyssa sought to alter the issue by saying, Congresswoman Crockett has been very vocal about bail reform and wrongful imprisonment. You may not agree with her, but she's showing up for critical talks. Sunny wasn't ready to go on. Tone matters, but criminal justice is important. Some people claim you pay more attention to the present than to the future. Jasmine let the stillness last a little longer than normal before saying, you want bridges in a soft but strong voice. People have told me that they didn't think my constituents deserve clean water or operating hospitals. I've worked with people who argued it was too expensive to put the roof on a school while their own kids went to private schools. And I still came. I shook hands. I gave it my best shot. So don't ask me why I build bridges. It's because I won't be quiet while they burn them. The room was quiet, and then it burst into applause. Whoopi was even impressed. Sunny stopped for a moment and then asked something that altered everything. Do you think you play the race card too much? There was a lot of stillness. Jasmine didn't move or smile. She merely had piercing eyes. She responded softly, I don't play the race card. I live the truth. The crowd went wild. Alyssa looked shocked. Charmaine's fists were tight behind the scenes. Okay, we're going to take a break, Whoopi said firmly. The cameras went to a commercial, but not before they caught Jasmine calm, sipping water, and adjusting her mic, as if she hadn't just answered the hardest question on live TV. But the real moment was coming when they came back, because Jasmine wasn't done. Not by a long shot. No flinching. No smile. Words that are plain and honest. When people say playing the race card, they really mean they want to ignore real experiences, Jasmine said. They don't want to know the truth. I won't change what I say to make other people feel better. It's not my responsibility to make people feel better. It's my job to make sure that those who have been ignored and punished are finally heard. The studio was entirely quiet. No coughing or moving around in seats. The person operating the camera even stopped moving. Sunny moved in her seat but didn't say anything. Jasmine continued on going. I was asked to come here to talk about policy, not personality. But let's be honest, tone only becomes a problem when certain people employ it. People don't tell Jim Jordan to calm down. No one tells Ted Cruz to grin more. But when I talk directly, it's a problem all of a sudden. Stop here. She looked straight at the camera and the people watching. There's a reason why so many black women stopped watching this show years ago. We didn't disagree. We just noticed how guests like us were treated differently when they didn't adjust to fit in. I came here hoping this conversation would be different. Sunny leaned forward and spoke sharply. I don't think that's right. There have been a lot of black women on this panel. We've talked about hard things. That doesn't mean there is bias. Jasmine did not blink. You can't always see it from where you are. But believe me, we feel it from where we are. The audience started to clap, but then they stopped because they weren't sure if it was the correct time. Whoopi said, we don't want to end the conversation, but let's keep it positive. Let's go on. But Jasmine wasn't finished. That's the thing, she remarked in a low voice. When someone says the problem out loud, the first thing you want to do is change the conversation, to say that it's not the right moment or that it's unpleasant. But the folks who are suffering don't get to pick the time. They live it every day. Sunny finally said, this isn't personal, with a sigh. But it was too late. I never said it was, Jasmine responded firmly. But you want me to explain my tone, my presence, and my goals. I came here to talk about changing the jail system. So, to be honest, let's be completely honest. Her voice kept calm, but what she said hit home. People who were watching from home started texting their pals and snapping screenshots. They knew this moment would go viral. Charmaine's phone kept buzzing in the back. There were a lot of mentions of Jasmine. People were already sharing clips, some of which were recorded straight from TVs. The hashtag Let Black Women Speak was very popular, almost atop. We're taking another break, Whoopi said. The camera moved back. The crowd clapped slowly and steadily for Jasmine, which signifies we hear you. The biggest moment of the show when it came back wasn't on set, it was online. Something inside Jasmine had shifted before the credits rolled. Not fury or frustration, but surety. The fact that she was sure the table she had been invited to was never arranged for her. She didn't yell. She didn't get any softer. She was calm, focused, and strong the whole time. Whoopi sought to guide the conversation back by saying, let's talk about your plan for prison reform. A lot of individuals want to know how it would influence families in their daily lives. Jasmine made it quite clear, a government panel that works on its own to immediately look into unjust convictions, not years later when the damage has already been done. Mandatory rehabilitation programs in state jails that are closely connected to communities. Ending contracts with private prisons because it's unethical to make money off of failure. She talked like someone who has been there, sitting in rooms, reading files, visiting families, and burying loved ones. She listed people she battled for, such Devin L., a 19-year-old who was sentenced to 30 years in prison for a drug conviction that wasn't violent. He died in prison before his appeal. The room kept quiet, not awkward, but respectful. Alyssa even nodded. Sunny then leaned in again and said, it's a strong plan. But where will support from both sides come from? And what do you tell the people that believe in you if it doesn't pass? Jasmine stopped. This time, it was up to them. I say that progress isn't always quick and shiny. It might be hard and slow at times. I know that someone is listening to me every time I talk, even if they didn't realize they could previously. She glanced at Sunny, not coldly, but directly. The hardest part isn't getting a bill passed. It's getting people to care about justice, even when it doesn't affect them. Sunny opened her mouth, but then she stopped. Whoopi grinned a little. Okay, we'll leave that alone. For a minute, the room was quiet. That was Jasmine's victory. No yelling. No drama. Just a statement that drew people in. The audience was shown via the camera. Some people stood up and clapped. Others leant in, wanting to hear more. This wasn't just a show. It was a time of transformation. Charmaine's phone kept vibrating backstage. Hashtag Let Black Women Speak is now one of the top 10 trending topics. Celebrities, activists, and politicians all started using the hashtag #Crockett, which quickly spread. She's not just talking, one person added. She is teaching. This is grace under fire. Another person said, I turned this on by mistake. Now I'm thinking about everything again. Sunny sat at the table with her hands folded. No smile, no fight. She said, I hear you, after a long pause. Jasmine nodded her head. Whoopi leaned in and said, Congresswoman, do you have any last words for the viewers? Jasmine looked around and then stared straight at the camera. Don't confuse loudness with worth. Truth doesn't have to yell to be strong. Speaking clearly and not apologizing can be the most radical thing a black woman can do. The crowd went wild. The clapping went on for more than 10 seconds. Something broke open, and it wasn't only on the show. Jasmine's words got out of the studio. They spread across social media in just a few minutes, changing the story before the credits were completed. The set was silent as the lights went out during the last break. The clapping stopped, but the tension lingered thick, like the air in a locked chamber. Whoopi was the first to depart. She rolled her shoulders and went to her dressing room. She said, We'll talk about how this went later. Alyssa murmured something to a producer and then walked away. That left Sunny and Jasmine alone. Even though they were still on mic, Sunny stared at Jasmine, then at her notes. She didn't say anything. At first, Jasmine didn't either. Charmaine watched from behind the scenes, sensing something was different. Jasmine wasn't only answering questions. She was also picking which ones were important. The stage manager murmured softly, back in 30. Sunny finally spoke up. You came in swinging today. Jasmine said calmly, I was ready. Sunny laughed softly. You think I came after you? Jasmine remarked. You came after a version of me that is easier to argue with. The one that is too loud, too obvious, and too sure of itself. I've seen that version used against women like me my whole life. Sunny looked down and twirled a pen between her fingers. I was trying to ask hard questions. Jasmine nodded, and I told them. People were uncomfortable not because of what I said, but because I didn't flinch. Whoopi came back before Sunny could answer. That was something. Alyssa smiled carefully. The internet is going to say a lot. Jasmine gazed at the people in the audience. Some people stood and talked softly. Some people were already scrolling through their phones. She could tell the story was out. It was already getting worse. Charmaine's phone kept buzzing in the back. People were cutting, editing, and reposting clips. One footage has Jasmine saying, I don't play the race card. A filmmaker with more than 2 million followers commented, I live the reality. An education nonprofit published another clip, calling her a voice of reason in a room full of soft bias. Producers talked quietly about whether the whole segment will be available online. The senior producer said, leave it alone. We are not keeping this a secret. Back on site, the cameras were ready to roll. Jasmine addressed the staff. Are you all okay? The sound guy smiled and gave a thumbs up. Best segment we've had in weeks. The red live light started to blink. I have felt exactly what Jasmine Crockett just said during faculty meetings. Thanks for not getting smaller. A cashier at a grocery shop in Phoenix shared the video again, stating, "We've all been told to be less so others can feel more. Not anymore." One message remarked, "She said it calm. That's what makes it loud." Soon, verified accounts joined in, Black artists, journalists, and organizers. But not only them. A former white firefighter from Ohio wrote, "I didn't know her name until today. I know it now. She's right." Hashtag Let Black Women Speak and hashtag Team Crockett were two of the hashtags that popped out, but the official page for The View still hadn't released the tape in the middle of all this. The clip spread even faster because of that quiet. People asked, why hasn't The View shared the best part of the year? What are you all afraid of? In a meeting room above the studio, producers rushed to decide whether or not to release the uncut film. The public had already done it by the time they agreed. It was raw, unfiltered, and without any corporate polish. When her phone rang, Jasmine and Charmaine were still in the SUV. "A journalist I trust contacted me. You're the top story on 3 cable news cycles." CNN even had a program called The Crockett Moment. Charmaine's jaw was tight as she looked through her phone. "They're calling it a moment like you didn't just make a real policy." Jasmine lifted an eyebrow. "That's how they make it less painful, by breaking it up into smaller pieces." "Want to make a statement?" Charmaine inquired. "No," Jasmine responded, taking off her heels. "I said what I said." When they got to her hotel in Arlington, she was trending in 15 locations. News anchors tried to break down what she said by running split-screen remarks. One panelist stated, "Crockett struck a chord because she's not acting or playing to the camera. She's just being honest." Another person said, "This is what happens when someone doesn't follow the tone policing that has ruled the media for decades. Even news sources that don't usually cover politics were paying attention. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett just changed the way you talk politics on daytime TV," BuzzFeed said. "Why the internet just crowned Jasmine Crockett the voice of 2025, Rolling Stone said. But it wasn't simply the news. Moms sent her messages. Young girls, teachers, and nurses all reached out. Someone said, "I didn't know how much I needed to see someone like you until today. I've held my voice back so many times, including in meetings, at supper, and in class. I took it back today. Thanks." Jasmine didn't cry, but she read the message 3 times. At the same time, Charmaine showed her a screenshot. Sunny Hostin's name was also trending, but for different reasons. Some people stood up for Sunny, but others weren't nice. Why does Sunny always make things harder for Black women than anyone else? One comment said, "This is why people don't believe The View anymore." Imagine asking someone to sit down at your table and then acting like they're too much when they bring seasoning. Sunny hadn't said anything publicly, but her quiet spoke more than most tweets. Jasmine knew that the real test wasn't what people said today. It was whether the message survived when the buzz died down. And that storm was still getting worse. Not only political Twitter was talking about Jasmine by the next morning, it was everywhere. Before coffee was even poured, morning shows were already covering the news. Before 9 a.m., clips were shown on 3 different networks. It's not often that daytime TV starts a national conversation, one anchor noted, but it happened yesterday. 2 analysts came on another broadcast and kept saying the phrase composure, but the pundits had already missed the point of the discourse. It was now in kitchens, living rooms, classrooms, and break rooms. Before the salon opened, a group of women met at a small salon in Shreveport, Louisiana. Someone connected a tablet to speakers and played the video again. One woman added, "She didn't flinch while nervously tugging her hair. She didn't have to," someone else said. "She knew what she was doing." They talked on how to talk to each other with respect, about how many times they were instructed to be careful about what they said when the true problem was that they said anything at all. High school students in the Black Student Union in Oakland watched the clip. One junior got up. "She said what my mom always says, but no one listens to her." Another student nodded their head. They said, "She didn't just speak for herself." She stood for all of us. Thousands of others posted the same message on message boards and in comment sections. This is what it looks like to speak truth to power without apology. My daughter saw this and said, "She looks like us." This is why we need more women like her in Congress, not fewer. Not everyone spoke nice things. Some news channels tried to change the way people thought about the event. Some opinion pieces argued Jasmine wasted a chance to bring people together. Some people felt she turned off moderate viewers. One person even stated she used her identity as a weapon. Jasmine didn't answer those. She didn't have to. People who didn't have media platforms or blue checks were already talking louder than the ones who did. Charmaine showed her a Facebook post from a retired public defender in Tennessee. "I've been in courtrooms next to women like Jasmine." The work they do is hidden behind the pressure. When one person finally shouts "no more," the whole system rattles. That was yesterday. Some creators on TikTok put together emotions that were happy and sad. One video showed a woman in a robe lip, syncing every syllable with her palm over her heart. Another video showed a youngster stopping the clip to talk about how teachers treated her differently when she spoke up. "Don't mistake volume for value," was a quote from Jasmine that even pastors utilized in their Sunday sermons. People who used to watch The View and stopped because they kept interrupting women who looked like them came back to say what many had been saying for years. "I stopped watching when they kept interrupting women who looked like me. I love Whoopi, but even she couldn't stop what happened yesterday. They always state they want strong voices, but not when the voice is rude." For many, Jasmine had hit a nerve and brought back a memory. People had told them to soften, shrink, and dilute themselves for their whole lives, at meetings, classes, and family dinners. They had been told to be less outspoken, less assertive, and less themselves. But this wasn't just one time on one show. It was about what that moment showed, the unspoken norms, the lines that aren't visible, and the cost of being heard when you're not the version people anticipate. Jasmine stayed quiet in the thick of it all. Not because she was hiding, but because she didn't need to say anything else. Her work, her calmness, and her words were still on their way. One tweet explained it best: Jasmine Crockett didn't go viral. She became noticeable. And now, you can't act like you didn't see it. But the opposite side couldn't stay quiet forever. Sunny Hostin was also popular. What she said next would either calm things down or make things worse. Sunny finally spoke up on Sunday afternoon, almost 48 hours after the show. She chose Instagram, a site she could manage, to write down her ideas without anyone else talking or interrupting her. It wasn't a long piece, but it was well written. I've always believed in having honest, hard conversations. That's what The View has been all about. I really admire Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and all she does. Our conversation was lively, and even though my inquiries were hard, I never meant to offend. I know that not everyone got it that way, and I'm listening for that. It closed with the remark, "We grow through dialogue," which is something we all know. The comments were switched off, but there were quick and violent replies. Screenshots of the post spread like wildfire on X and TikTok. The tone of the statement, not the phrase itself, set things off. It sounded like they were trying to calm the storm without admitting that it was raining. People on other sites said what Sunny's locked comments wouldn't let them say: "This is not an apology." She's listening, but to whom? She questioned Jasmine's tone for 30 minutes before hiding behind a caption. "This is PR, not growth." Others spoke up for her faithful admirers, saying it was brave to say anything at all. It's part of the job to ask tough questions. Jasmine was also smart. "This is too much." But everyone agreed that the post missed the mark. It didn't get to the heart of the matter, how some visitors are treated differently and how challenging questions come with a side of disdain when the guest is a Black woman who won't lower her voice to match the space. Jasmine didn't say anything until Charmaine showed her the post that night. They were in a lounge at a hotel in Arlington. The structures were in the way of the sun setting. Jasmine looked at the post once, then again. She didn't shake her head or groan. She only looked up. "She's listening," Jasmine remarked. "Are you going to answer?" Charmaine asked. Jasmine drank some tea. I already did on TV with my mic on. It was getting harder to not reply again. People in the media got in touch. Invitations were sent out by morning shows. Podcasts that had never mentioned Jasmine before hailed her an important voice in the cultural conversation. She shared a brief video by Monday morning. No fancy beginning. No music. Her sitting on a bench in Fort Worth. The wind gently moved her hair. No script in her hands. She started with, "I've seen Sunny's post." I think she meant what she said. But here's the thing. What you meant doesn't change what happened. When someone claims they feel insulted, you can't merely answer, "That wasn't my intention." It has to be, "I understand. I see how that went. I'll do better." This is what being responsible looks like. That's how we move forward, together. She didn't put a tag on Sunny. She didn't want anything. She ended the video with words that impacted harder than any viral soundbite. The problem isn't speaking the truth. The problem is that they want you to dilute things down so it's easier to swallow. In just 2 hours, the film had been watched by 500,000 people. People wrote in, "That's how you respond with kindness and clarity. She is teaching us how to deal with problems without losing our voice. This is what it means to be a leader." Even the craziness of social media stopped for a moment. Jasmine had done something unusual. She kept her head up, recognized how complicated it was, and wouldn't become smaller. Sunny put the video back on her Instagram story later that day. No words. It wasn't support, but it wasn't against it either. That might have been enough. Not sure. But both women had talked for the first time since the filming. The audience had to decide which story they thought was true. Jasmine's chat kept going long after the hashtag stopped being popular. In classrooms, offices, and media rooms, women taught that truth doesn't need a filter to be important. By the end of the week, the cacophony started to die down. There were no more headlines about Jasmine Crockett. There weren't a lot of posts about her name. But her remarks and quiet certainty have gotten into deeper conversations. Conversations that don't get a lot of attention, but are more important. A group of ladies convened in a community center in Jackson, Mississippi for their usual Saturday discussion. They usually talked about school drama, zoning, and childcare. But today, they started with Jasmine. An older woman in a red cardigan stated, "I keep thinking about how she didn't say sorry for being direct. It made me think of all the times I've said sorry just for saying what needed to be said." Her niece said she didn't try to be nice to fit in. She was just there. That was the news that spread across the country. Those talks continued happening. They weren't just short clips anymore. They were about something deeper, the price of honesty in places where comfort is more important than clarity. A lecturer in a Madison journalism class stopped the lecture to show Jasmine's film. Then they asked, what matters more, how it sounds, or why it was said? A quiet kid in the back raised his hand and said, both matter, but one of them gets folks out for free. The other one just gets people jobs. A high school debate coach in Fresno changed his curriculum to include what he called the Crockett method. Clear, calm arguments based on real-life experience, not simply fancy jargon. He told his students, if your argument doesn't put anything at risk, you're just talking. Jasmine went back to work in Arlington like she did every other week. She didn't post about her wins, did not set up interviews. She talked with people who lived in her district, visited a halfway home, and called back 2 moms whose sons were in jail in the county waiting for trial. The time on The View wasn't the best thing that ever happened to her career. It was just another location that needs to be reminded of who gets heard and why that matters. But she realized that something had changed. Women she'd never met had written stories for her that they'd never told anyone else. The messages came from survivors, veterans, college students, black women, brown women, white women, and even some men who quietly revealed they had been interrupting their wives, co-workers, and daughters for years without knowing how it felt. And even while some people still talked about tone, refinement, and presentation, those talks were shifting too. The aim was never to win a discussion. It was about not losing yourself along the way. That was the real deal. Not when Jasmine talked, but she didn't get smaller. Not when the video got viral, but it got to someone who needed permission to tell their own truth. Not when the camera turned away, but when someone observing stood a little higher in their next meeting and answered a question without softening their voice, or told someone straight out, "You don't get to choose how I show up." In reality, hardly everyone remembers every episode of The View. They don't remember every guest, every hot topic, or every brawl on the panel. But this one stayed. Because it wasn't about politics. It was about being there, having authority, and the cost of speaking plainly in places where people don't want to hear you. Jasmine Crockett didn't just have one moment. She made a mirror and gave it to the country. Some people turned away. People looked and saw themselves. The main thing to remember from this story is that your voice is not too much. Your truth isn't too loud. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is not say sorry for either. If this story touched you, please share it, talk about it, and speak up. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales that cut through the noise and leave something true behind.